So today I'm going to be talking to you about how to sew the fleece mittens for our stake service project. First of all, when you trace and cut out the fleece, you'll want the stretch of the fleece to be going where the wrist is, not in this direction. So make sure the stretch is going here, trace it, cut it out. Then when you're going to sew it, you'll need to put two together. Make sure it's lined up. You can pin it if you want to, but the first step is only to sew from here to here with a basic stitch. So you want to allow for, I believe, 1/4 inch seams. Yeah, 1/4 inch seams. So. Next, you're going to open up. You can see it's sewn from the wrist just to the thumb here. And I'll trim the excess so it doesn't get in the way. Then you're going to open up the mitten and open up the seam that you just sewed down here. Get it ready. I'm going to do a zigzag stitch. I like to use number 4 on my machine. It's kind of a larger zigzag. And I'm going to do it from one side of the wrist, pin this down, do it right there, and then do it clear to the other side. The excess again. Next, I'm going to take a piece of elastic. It's about 7.5 inches long. I'm going to fold it in half to find the center point. And then I'm going to take a measuring tape. I found that the best placement of this is about 1 3/4 inch from the wrist. And then I'll put my elastic like halfway, the halfway point, right at that point. I open it up, pin it. I only use 3 pins in this part of the sewing process. This is probably the most tedious part. So I'll measure again, 1 3/4 inches. And you can see I just pull the elastic to that point. It kind of pulls the whole mitten, but that's okay. Gonna pin it again. I like to use these really long pins for this part so I can have the ball sticking way out so the elastic doesn't move. You'll see what I mean in a moment when I sew it. And then I'll do one on the other part of the wrist. 1 3/4, just pull the elastic again. It'll pull the mitten, but that's okay. I'll grab a pin. This is a little pin. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to move this back to a basic stitch and see how the ball is way behind the foot here. Then I lower it down. Now the elastic's trapped and I can pull my pin out. Okay, now I'm just going to sew, oh actually, excuse me, it's not a basic stitch. This is actually going to be another zigzag stitch, just like the size. Your large zigzag, just like at the bottom. Get it to secure, and then I'll do that. I like to have half of the stitch on the fleece and half of it on the elastic. Okay, here we go. Okay, after I get it started, then I'm gonna pull this really tight so that it's stretched out. And I just hold it where the pin is in the middle. getting close, so I'm gonna take my pin out. Now I'm gonna pull it from this edge point here so that it's still really tight. Make sure that my fleece is laid out nicely under that elastic. Okay, now I'm gonna push the last pin through and finish it off. So it should look like this. At this point, zigzag stitch here, zigzag stitch here. Trim the excess off. Okay, now we're going to fold it inside out, just like a normal mitten would look. You can feel free to put pins in if you want. I noticed that the fleece sticks to each other really well, so I don't usually need to put pins in it, but I'll put some in for this video. If you've traced and cut very precisely and they match up evenly, it's very easy to do it without pins. Like I said, because the fleece doesn't really let go of each other very much, it kind of clings together. But I'll put a few pins in here. Okay, so now I'm going to do a basic stitch all the way along the edge down to where the thumb and fingers meet, and then all the way back up to here. Then I'm going to do a zigzag stitch from here back to where this meets, right there. A zigzag stitch to reinforce by the thumb. So a basic stitch. Let's see if we can get this lined up right. Lost my thread. Just a second. Okay, lift up the foot again. There we go. All right. Make sure your elastic's under there if you can, just to secure it into the seam. Push your pins out as you go. Again, this is a 1/4 inch allowance. Try to round it if you want to, or you can just push your needle down and pivot it. I kind of do a combination of both when I do this. Just make sure your needle's in before you lift up the foot so that you don't get any weird loose stitches. Okay, then pull out your last pin. Okay, now I'm going to lift up my needle, switch to that zigzag stitch, and finish it off. So this is right in the thumb part, like the top of the thumb down to the side of the thumb here. Okay, now we're going to pull this out. Trim off all the excess. Okay, you can come down to See how the zigzag's right here on the side of the thumb? You probably could do it a little bit higher on the thumb too if you wanted. Now I'm gonna come down to where these points meet, and I'm gonna trim this a tiny bit, but not close to the stitch because we don't want the stitch to get torn. And then I'm gonna turn the mitten. This is what it looks like. I'm gonna turn it inside out. Put my fingers into it, put my thumb into it. Okay, and there's your finished mitten.